Alright, hello. My name's Rich, and welcome to the first devlog of Enter the Chainsaw, a fast-paced first-person hack and slash that prioritizes satisfying combat and rapid movement. It's a project I've been working on for these past few weeks, and I've sort of decided that logging my development process and creating these devlogs is first just a good way of getting the game out there in the public eye, so I can start getting some initial feedback and impressions already from the beginning of development. And secondly, I just sort of want this archive I can look back to in the future, just to see how far the project has come. That being said, I'll try to keep these as brief and to the point as possible, because I don't want the making of these to cut too much into the actual development time, so I'll only just generally go over the stuff that's being done, and not delve too much in the technical detail. So first I guess I'll talk a bit about how this project started, the ideas and inspirations, if you will, and then later we can delve a bit deeper into the mechanics themselves. So I've always enjoyed fast-paced games that give the player like various cool movement options and ties it together with precision-based combat. One of my favorites being Titanfall 2, for example. If you play that game, you know just how fun it is to zip around with a grappling hook and wall running all over the place, while at the same time trying to line up shots to your enemies. So my favorite part was never the actual Titan part of Titanfall. I didn't much like to stomp around in a big heavy mech. I just sort of wanted to fly around and parkour all over the place. So I always wanted to create a game that also gives you this fast first-person movement with wall running and grappling hooks. But I didn't want to make it just another shooter, because I sort of feel like that's already done very, very well by many other games. Ultra Kill comes to mind, for example. And then after some thinking, I sort of realized how much I enjoy melee weapons in first-person games. Like, I think I use the katana and mantis blades in Cyberpunk 2077 more than guns, because I just find it more cathartic and satisfying to dodge bullets and get up close and personal. I'm just slicing them into bits instead of shooting the enemies from the cover. So I started thinking about how much I'd like to make a game like that, where the whole point is to be constantly moving and avoiding enemy attacks, but at the same time getting close to them to slash them up. And also, I don't think at least that there are that many games that focus on a fast-paced FPS melee combat. Ghost Runner comes to mind, Dying Light sorta, but not that many other examples come to mind. Sure, many FPS games have melee combat, but not that many focus on it, I think. So I wanted to explore this idea a bit deeper. And when it came to the weapon of choice, I knew from the beginning I didn't want for it to be just like a regular sword or a katana. I sort of wanted for your weapon to be almost the identity of the game, and I wanted that it's somewhat unconventional, maybe. I don't know where exactly the idea of a chainsaw came from. Maybe I just thought about it, how Doom has a chainsaw or something. But when I thought about it, it all sort of clicked into place, where I was like, oh, there's a lot of things you can do with a chainsaw. First, it gives a weapon whose whole purpose is to tear through things. And second, if you stretch your imagination a bit, you can also imagine movement with it, where if you stick it into the ground or walls, it propels you forward. And maybe you can use the chain itself as a grappling hook of sorts, where you whip the chain off and grab an enemy or wall to reel into. So a single tool both provides your combat and movement abilities, which ties greatly into making that your weapon is sort of the whole identity of the game. So I landed on a chainsaw-based movement hack and slash. So I got to work. I opened up Blender, threw together something vaguely resembling a chainsaw, and threw that in the Unity game engine. Quick note on the engine choice: Unreal was off the table immediately, since I have basically zero experience with it, and it seems far too bloated and heavy of an engine to work with for a project like this anyways. So that left either Unity or Godot. Godot would be the better choice, to be fair, but because I have such little experience with it, as opposed to Unity, which I have used in a professional environment for 3 years, and in total for about 6 now, and I wanted to get something going as fast as possible, I went with Unity for now. But hell, who knows, maybe I'll switch to Godot at some point if I feel like it'd be advantageous to do so. But in the end, the engine doesn't matter, it's the developer anyways, so with that in mind, let's continue. So I made a physics-based character controller, gave some basic animations to the saw, and very quickly I had something to work with. I can wall ride, boost along the ground, and do attacks. It's obviously still far from perfect and will need continuous improvement, but it's a start. I also realized that I need some sort of an enemy to start implementing some combat mechanics. And because I already knew that due to the fact that I want some limb separation and decapitation mechanics in the game, a pre-made 3D model of a character for testing most likely won't do, and I'll have to either find a specific asset or make something from scratch. So since I'm not a fan of using just random pre-made assets unless absolutely necessary, I just opened up Blender again and made this low poly, nondescript thug and gave him some initial animations like running, idling around, attacking, and staggering. I had the idea that maybe he's some sort of a corrupt security mercenary type guy, but the lore of the game isn't exactly fleshed out yet, so who knows. I also created these separate limb models from the character used for the separation mechanics, and in the end put that all back into Unity. I set up ragdolling and limb separation depending on where the saw collider hits, made some blood flowing and splatter effects, which I'm actually kind of proud of. They're gory, over the top, but still kind of stylized. And I also added a slowdown effect to the saw if it successfully connects to the enemy, creating this quick sort of impact frame, sawing through something effect. And also I made a very rudimentary AI for the enemy. It basically just has a detection range where it navigates towards you and attacks. Afterwards, I went back to Blender and, using the first enemy as a base, created a slightly different enemy that uses a gun instead of a melee weapon, but still has basically the same animations except where the attack animation is one of shooting a gun instead of a melee swing, and put that into the project too. And because it's basically the same enemy, it was very quick to set up. Most of the time actually was just spent making him aim and shoot projectiles at the player. So doing all this gives me a good enough base to work with to further refine the movement and combat. And for now I see the combat as sort of a quick to kill, quick to die thing, where you can kill enemies really quickly, maybe in just a single swing, but it can also do the same to you, making you always be moving and aware of your surroundings. And since we already have some first 3D models in the game, I guess it's a good time to more generally talk about what's the planned aesthetic of the game. At first I thought about going in the tried and true PlayStation 1 era type graphics with the pixelated textures and low poly models, but I rather quickly decided against it. Since so many indie games already do that, I kind of didn't want to tread the same exact path. So I went for the slightly less but still overused cel shaded look. I really like this, especially from some of the earliest games that tried this, like Jet Set Radio or Okami. So instead of looking like a PlayStation 1 game, mine looks like an early PlayStation 2 game. Still kinda low poly and basically programmer art, but I think it adds to the charm a bit, and the less detailed the look, the more easy it is to create assets for it, and since I'm currently soloing this whole thing, it kind of eases the burden a bit. Regarding the cel shading, I found a pretty neat customizable shader for this, except the way you do the black outlines is kinda stupid, since you have to attach a separate material slot for it, and I have my suspicions it's costing me some performance. Not now, but it might do it in the future, and probably a more robust outlining solution is probably worth looking into in the future. And talking about the future, I guess it's a good time to talk about what's the complete vision of the game. What would the version 1 contain? How does the main gameplay loop look like? So I'm trying to keep the scope as limited as possible because I know how quickly scope creep occurs and how it can be majorly detrimental to the development of the game. But for now I have plans for two essentially game modes. You have a level-based campaign and an arena mode. So in the campaign you have linear levels that you attempt to get through and gain a score as big as possible to get like a final ranking from like S to D or something. The score is gained by both getting through the level in a speedy manner, but also by efficiently eliminating your enemies. This makes you utilize not only your movement, but also your combat skills. And I don't want the levels to only be a pure speed race, where you just ignore your enemies and zip to the finish, but more like a balancing act between speed and combat. And this actually ties into some of the core mechanics that I'll touch upon a bit later, and you can always release more levels after version 1 has been released, kind of like a new chapter drops, which contain a bunch of new levels. And the second game mode is an arena mode, where instead of like a linear level, you are placed in a small open arena with continuously spawning enemies, and you try to survive as long as possible, and rack up a score as large as possible. For now, I imagine the survival aspect coming from some sort of a kill timer, which you extend by killing enemies, but it progressively becomes harder to extend this timer. So you both have to be careful of the enemies, but at the same time be continuously forced to engage with them. Now, there are two big reasons why I want this arena mode, instead of just having the campaign levels. And the first reason is more related to when the game will be finished, where I just like when games have some sort of infinite horde mode, where you can just go in and practice your skills and have something to do even when you've completed all the levels. And the second, more immediate reason is that creating a game mode that's basically a playground for the player to experience all the game's mechanics, I think would be the fastest way of getting the still in development product to the public, acting as sort of a demo, where you basically can already experience a vertical slice of the game, where the players can get a feel for the movement and the combat and the general feel of the game, and give me some feedback on the main areas of improvement regarding the core gameplay. So actually this arena type gameplay is what I'm focusing on first. However, there is obviously still a ton of work to be done before I think it'd be worth involving the public, but I hope to get to that point somewhat soonish, maybe end of summer, I hope, depending on how life turns out. So before I mentioned that balancing act between movement and combat will both actually tie into each other, where to go fast you need to be killing, and to be killing you need to be going fast. And this is mainly related to the heat mechanic in the game. Now, you might have noticed in the very crappy looking debug stats menu on the top left that there is a heat value that goes up when you're either riding the saw, on the ground, or wall riding, and goes down when you're not. Basically, as you wall ride or boost along the ground, you're overheating the chain of the saw and letting it cool down when you're not. And if that heat meter reaches 100, your chain snaps and you can no longer wall ride or boost, and your attacks do very little to no damage. And that requires you to basically reload your saw by quickly swapping in a new chain. And at first this might seem contradictory to the gameplay. Why would you want to impose a cooldown on the cool movement options presented to the player? But there is a key factor missing. The blood of your enemies cools your saw down. So chopping up an enemy instantly takes a chunk out of your heat meter. This forces the player to engage in combat to manage their heat, or else they're gonna be punished by getting their movement and combat options taken away while they swap in a new chain, making them exposed. So that broadly covers the main gameplay ideas for the game. So for the end now, let's quickly go over the stuff that's done and what's being currently worked on. So we have the first version of the movement system with wall riding and ground riding, I just call it boosting, and the heat management mechanic. We have combat with two different dismemberable enemy types, a close range melee one armed with a police nightstick, and a ranged one armed with a pistol that requires you to constantly stay in motion to dodge the projectiles. And we have a basic arena and a linear level, those are mainly just for demonstration and development purposes, and the first few visual effects like blood from the enemies and sparks from your saw. And as for the main stuff I'm working on right now is mainly just related to improving the combat and the movement and just the general juice, as they say in the biz. Since those are parts of the core gameplay loop, those are the things I want to get to a good level first before I get to stuff like making more different enemies and level design. I want to get to the basics done before I get to the more content production phase. As I see it, it needs to be so that even if I'm in a boxy level with temporary development textures and a few enemies, moving around that level and killing those enemies needs to be as satisfying as possible before I start thinking about how many levels I'm gonna put in the game or like customization options for your saw or something. So yeah, that about covers this initial introductory devlog. And if this looks interesting to you, make sure to follow. Any suggestions or feedback is greatly appreciated. And I hope this was somewhat tolerable and not too disjointed and incomprehensible. I'm still learning how this whole video production thing works, and who would have thought that writing a script and reading from it while trying to sound natural and cover all the essential points is way more difficult than you'd think. But I'm learning, anyways, see you on the next one. That's hopefully somewhat soon. I'd like to get these one out at least once or twice a month, depending on how well the progress goes. And yeah, until next time.